And now finally, I would like to talk about a game that I have started recently. I'm a couple hours in. It's called Of Orcs and Men, which I am now kind of understanding is actually a sort of intentional reference to Of Mice and Men. So Of Orcs and Men, I first discovered this because I remember I was reading about like just obscure games that people like, and someone mentioned a game called a series of games called Styx. Styx, like the river Styx, as these like stealth games that were like, maybe not the greatest in the genre, but hey, I really like them kind of thing. And I looked it up, and it just so happened that the Styx games, it's this series of stealth games about a little goblin guy in this like dark fantasy setting. And it is a spin-off. There's like, first of all, there's like 3 or 4 Styx games. There's way more. Like, I had never heard of this. And these are from like the last 10 years too. It's a spin-off. It's like the persona to Of Orcs and Men's Shin Megami Tensei, which only had 1 game. So if Orcs and Men, I decided I happened to also get them all in a bundle for like $5 at the exact time that I was looking them up. So I've started with Of Orcs and Men, which is not a stealth game. I guess I can explain the basic premise. This is kind of an underdog game. It feels kind of cheap in certain ways. You can feel the budget. You can feel the budget in some ways. You can also feel that they had the creators really wanted to make something cool, and for the most part that is shown through, whatever. It's apparent. It kind of feels like the little game that could. The basic premise, it takes place in a very Tolkien-esque but kind of like gritty fantasy setting. So there's like humans, there's orcs and elves and dwarves and all the classic fantasy races. The human beings have united and allied themselves with the dwarves and the elves, and they've decided that they want to expand southward. And they have engaged in a crusade, a genocidal crusade against the southern people, which are mostly orcs. And there has been a war that has raged for years at this point when the game opens, that the orcs have been losing. And there is like an inquisition that like has now been goes around and hunts for any remaining orc like militants that are still around, or just any orcs in general, so that they can either be subjugated as slaves or just killed if they resist, if they don't surrender. So obviously, there's some real world parallels to this. And the main character is an orc named Arkai, or Arkael. It's one of those little things that are like, it kind of sounds like the voice director didn't get everybody on the same page about how to pronounce the main character's name. It's spelled Arkail, and I think it's supposed to be Arkai, but some people call it Arkael, which honestly could have been intentional. As someone named Taigen, it is just kind of accurate that people are just going to pronounce your name however the fuck they interpret it. So Arkai has been given, he is a member of a group called the Bloodjaws, which are one of the last holdouts of the orc resistance against the human empire. And there's only like a couple of them. There's like less than a dozen members. And they're like, basically, we're going for the all or nothing. Arkai, your job is to kill the fucking emperor. You're gonna assassinate the emperor. But like, first you gotta save a wizard or something. So Arkai is given like mission number 1, right? And in order to accomplish this, he is given a guide of a little goblin man named Styx, who is like an assassin, stealthy thief guy for hire. Thus begins the Of Mice and Men, but about and killing an emperor to stop a genocide. Stop a genocidal regime. And it is very like Arkai is the big strong guy who isn't dumb. He isn't fuck. Who's the big guy? Is it Lenny? Is Lenny the big guy in Of Mice and Men? I read Of Mice and Men so long ago. He's the big guy. He's not dumb. He is actually fairly like intelligent in terms of like how fast he's able to pick up information. He's just more of like a brute force. He takes the physical problem solving route first, as opposed to Styx, who is obviously a tiny guy who frequently has to talk his way out of situations or be like, hey guys, hey, hey, maybe I can do something for you. And he's got to rely on like his stealth and his speed and sneakiness and his cunning. So they kind of have these slightly clashing personalities. But they get along. They've just got slightly different gut instincts about what to do. And you essentially go through... The gameplay manifests in the form of these very linear, at this point, levels. With real-time with pause combat. So... This is one of those games that when I say it feels like, kind of a passion project, it's like, you remember when I talked about Kunitsugami and I was like, this is the kind of game, this feels like a game that someone really wanted to make. Someone had an idea that had never been realized by any other game in a way that satisfied them, and they wanted to do it. So the combat system in this game is, I think, pretty cool. Essentially, you get into combat encounters, and you have to pause the game. I believe that there might be like there is a default attack that both characters will do, and to like the nearest enemy. But really, what you're doing is you are pressing a button like the spacebar by default to slow down the game to like extremely slow speeds. Slow motion. It's not like true pause, but it is like slowing down dramatically. And then you get a kind of like a weapon wheel of options between 3 different categories: an offensive, defensive, and special abilities or moves. So each character has their own set of... Okay, well actually it's different. So Arkai gets offensive and defensive. Styx gets melee and ranged. And then both of them have special moves that are like rezzing your partner. Arkai has an ability to just toss Styx, which is really funny. It's stuff like that. I think like there's some healing. So it's like supportive abilities basically, or things that interact with the other character. And then you get to like assign the target of who you want the character to attack. And there is a fairly in-depth system of like damage and range, number of hits, counterattacks. There's kind of like a Dark Souls poise stat, which is... It's called stability. You have a number of attributes, and the attributes all affect like a couple different stats. There's like whole RPG system. There's like you can level up and like get points, like attribute points to assign. You can learn new skills and level up skills to give them like one of two. Each skill has like one of two different upgrades, and you can pick one of them. There's like weapons and equipment to boost your, different stats and all that. It's got some like, RPG stuff going on. So you're like, where was I? I kind of got sidetracked. So you go into combat, you pause, and then you can queue up a number, like up to 4 actions, and assign, who you want for those. So, I was talking about, okay. So there's this whole system where like, there's a balance between how much damage an attack does, how fast it comes out. Basic, and like that matters because there's like an amount of startup. And you have this like stability stat, and if you get hit in the startup of an attack, you can get thrown off balance and have your attack be interrupted, and then the character will have to like, I believe the automatic behavior is just to like try to do it again, which again puts you in a long startup. There are like stuns. There are chances that you can counter. You can like block, dodge, counter, which are all like different things. And I think that they interact differently with like certain stats of different abilities. It's very in-depth. And once you've got a couple of skills for each character, like once you hit like level 3 or 4, which is pretty early in the game, suddenly like you have to start approaching situations a lot differently. So like there's a very simple combo with Sticks is he has a move that lets him kick an opponent backwards, which will momentarily stun them and interrupt them if they were in the middle of something. And then you can combo that with like tossing like a bunch of knife tosses from his ranged move pool. Our Kai has multiple different ways that he can stun or enter. So he has like a big wind-up punch that has a high chance to stun the opponent. But it has a ton of startup, and you can be interrupted out of it to kind of give it, that's like the risk reward. You've also got like a weaker like triple slap move that can interrupt an opponent's move. So if an opponent has an attack with a big wind-up, and there's only like so many opponent behaviors. It's generally like there's like a couple of different move sets that enemies can have. Or do they have a sword and shield, or a spear? Some of them have crossbows. And so you kind of like learn that they have different speeds that they can attack at and different ranges. And so you have to fight them all a little bit differently. There are like a generally good combo that you can figure out with like stringing a couple like you have like one move that hits hits like 3 times and pulls a bunch of aggro. It generates a bunch of aggro to you, and then you can combo that with a move that it's like a feint, where you like do a fake out attack and then do like a big higher powered swing, which is another like high startup but high damage thing. And then like a quick attack and then like a heavy attack. That was what I figured out. And I imagine it'll get more complex. Like there's like a charge move. So like, let me just break into combat and then do my other stuff. You can figure out a bunch of different sequences and ways to approach different situations, and it changes depending on what enemy you're dealing with, which is really neat. And both characters have these fairly deep move pools that you have to take into account depending on what fight you're going into. Sticks is stealthy, so he has the additional option of going invisible, and he's able to get behind people and assassinate them. It is not like a stealth game unless you do it right in front, like in the sight line of another like enemy. You are probably not going to get found. Like there is basically, there's no like sound, like noise system. They aren't going to be like, what was that? They can be like staring across the field at a dead body and just not even notice it. So I've kind of, so what you can, I've gotten into this kind of loop of scouting ahead with sticks, taking out as many enemies as I can without getting noticed. And then, like, who's the last one? So there's, like, this one instance where there's a bunch of, like, there's, like, 4 guys in armor who are really tough to take down. And then there's, like, another 3 dudes. No, there's, like, 3 dudes in armor. It's some mix. There's a couple of armored up guys. And then, like, some other soldiers in, like, leather armor, like, local military or whatever. Local militia. And you've got to get past them. And you have to fight. So there's like 7 enemies total. And I discovered that with sticks, you can go and take out 2 of them without being noticed. But after that, anyone that you would assassinate will alert the other enemies because they're all like kind of clumped up. Most of them are clumped up. You can take out the ones on the far reaches. So who is the best third target to alert them to? So now you have to do a bunch of like sizing up the different enemies and who's the most dangerous, who do I have the most trouble with. And then even after I discovered that, I had to reload that save multiple times because I then had to figure out what the best strategy was for actually taking all of them out. And I eventually figured out like where to stand, like where and how to bring Arkai into the fight. And who to aggro with him so that Styx wasn't getting focused down as much because he's obviously a lot more fragile. And then what moves to use to like throw them off balance. Should Arkai focus on the armored guys first or the weaker enemies? I had Styx take out the weaker guys first just because he can kind of glass cannon them. And then like constantly like pausing and then like having Arkai like hit another enemy with a move to aggro them and like reassigning targets and stuff. And it might sound like I did the same combat encounter probably like 10 times, but it didn't get frustrating just because I felt like it was a puzzle that I was figuring out. What's the best way to handle this situation? What is the combination of... What's the approach? What combination of moves gives me the best chances of making it through this? Because after each encounter, they'll just naturally... Arkai and Styx both heal up. So it's mostly like a lot of individual little combat puzzles is sort of what it feels like. At first, you're just kind of confronted with like, okay, how do I comfortably take on 4 guys? Because you are almost always outnumbered in this game, which is kind of neat. So how do I take on 4 guys? And then you get kind of comfortable with that. And then it becomes, okay, now the game is starting to throw more enemies and more complex and difficult enemies with like more armor. And there's like ability, like Styx has a move to like lower an opponent's armor and stuff like that. So, maybe I can use him for that. Enemies with different types of weapons. There are enemies who are... Oh my god, okay. So, one aspect is that Arkai is also like a berserker. He has a rage bar that fills up as he takes damage. And when it maxes out, he gains a little bit of health. And then, which I guess is supposed to represent like an adrenaline rush. And he goes berserk. And he will just start attacking anything in sight, including Styx if there's no other enemies around. So there are situations where there are some enemies who are actually out of reach that you would have to snipe out with Styx's throwing daggers. Arkai goes berserk, kills all of the regular like enemies on the ground, and then starts beating up Styx and fucking throttling him. And you can't control it. You cannot control what he does in berserker mode. You can manage... He has a move that's like a big roar that I think it restores a little bit of health, and it also subtracts... It also like drains some rage. So you do get to control it, but you've got to keep track of a lot of stuff. And mind you, the game is... A lot of it is happening in real time. The pause is definitely... The slowdown is definitely substantial. but it is like, time is still moving. So you kind of have to figure it out. This is a game where you save a lot. You save between every single combat encounter. And you know what? So far, it's been pretty fun. I actually quite like it. It definitely, it feels like an underdog game. Oh, hang on. So this is by a studio called Cyanide Entertainment? Cyanide SA. Apparently they did, they did the 2018 Call of Cthulhu game. They do Blood Bowl? Yeah, they do the Blood Bowl games. A lot of pro cycling manager, pro basketball manager. They do like these sports manager games. Apparently they made a Game of Thrones game also in 2012, which apparently uses a very similar combat system. I guess they developed it maybe for that. Maybe they developed it at the same time and then like used the same technology. That's kind of interesting. And then before that, they did a lot of, sports games and then random fantasy action games. They did Loki. They did Loki from 2007. Does anyone know that game? It's like a hack and slash thing. Anyway, of Orcs and Men. I can only imagine that this will end with Styx killing our Kai. Spoilers for Of Mice and Men. Pretty cool game. And just like one of these random games you've probably never heard of. I would recommend it so far. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.